Hi students, once again I am just meeting you to discuss the lesson Biodiversity and its conservation. In that one, yesterday we were talking about causes of biodiversity loss. There are many factors responsible for the loss of biodiversity. One, habitat loss. Two, habitat fragmentation. Three, overexploitation. The fourth one, exotic species invasion. With that, we concluded yesterday. Today, we have to go for the next one, the fifth one, global climate changes. Global climate changes. One of the factors responsible for biodiversity loss. You know, industrialization is a major contributor to climate change and is considered as a threat to biodiversity. A major contributor to that is climate change. And you know that one, we are providing energy to the industries. So that energy drives industry, and that is provided by the burning of fossil fuels, like what we call the coal, petroleum products, etc. This increases the emission of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, leading to climate change. So energy is provided by the burning of fossil fuels. This results in the emission of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, leading to what's called climate change. So normally the carbon dioxide is absorbed by the trees for utilization for storage in the form of sugars. But while we are just destroying the forests, for example, large scale deforestation. So due to large scale deforestation, the emitted carbon dioxide cannot be absorbed fully because of the deforestation. And the carbon dioxide concentration increases in the air. What are the ill effects of increase in concentration of carbon dioxide? So, as a result, you know that one, climate change occurs. The climate change increases. One, the land and ocean temperature. Two, the precipitation patterns, nothing but the rainfall patterns, changes in the precipitation patterns, and rises the sea level. And as a result of these three, we have some changes which cause the following effects. Melting of glaciers, you know that one. So water inundation, so the seawater intrusion enter into the what is called the land areas. So less predictability of what is called weather patterns, extreme weather conditions, movement of animals out of their habitats, loss of forest trees. You see that one. So all these things are happening. Even also the development of scarlet disease. Scarlet disease. I'll tell you more about this one after writing that one. So anyway, now we see that one climate change is an imminent, just actually danger. Almost happen. Almost actually causes danger. That's what's called imminent danger for what we have the existing biodiversity. So anyway, the global climate change causes some effects, and these effects in turn cause the melting of glaciers. That is why we have the sea level increases. We cannot predict the weather patterns, etc. We'll see. Now, what are the effects of global climatic changes? I mentioned already increase in carbon dioxide, which results in increase in sea level. We have precipitation patterns, change in precipitation patterns, etc. As a result of these changes, because of climate, we have the following effects. Number one, melting of glaciers. That's the main reason for increasing the sea level. Number two, water inundation. It is nothing but the water flood. Inundation means you're referring with the flood. Referring to what is called the flood. Now, less predictability of weather patterns. Predictability. We cannot predict the weather patterns. Now, also you know that one because of the climatic change, we cannot predict the weather patterns. Extreme weather conditions, either hot or cold conditions. Outbreak of scarlet diseases. Scarlet disease means the filthy diseases like typhoid, cholera, even tuberculosis. These are all called actually filthy diseases which are being developed because of what is called, that is, the slum areas. There you have the stagnation of water, etc., due to flood or any other rainfall. Then migration of animals, movement of animals from that area, and loss of trees in forests, falling of trees because of change in climate change. They cannot tolerate the extreme weather patterns, therefore they would die. So we can see climate change is an imminent danger to the existing biodiversity. Imminent danger means about happen, just a major danger that is to the existing biodiversity. So these are the effects of global climatic changes. Now we have to make a link between the human well-being, the climatic change, and the biodiversity. Now let's see the links between biodiversity, climate change, and human well-being. So I'm taking 4 units here: human, biodiversity, climate, and biogeochemical cycles. The biogeochemical cycles include the various cycles of carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc. Now let's see the relationship. Now the biodiversity just provides ecosystem services to human. The arrow mark is towards the human well-being. So what are ecosystem services? So the various products of ecosystem processes. The products of ecosystem processes. They are called ecosystem services. The products of ecosystem, that is services, and the products of ecosystem processes we can see. The products of ecosystem processes are called ecosystem services. For example, the forests normally purify air and water, pollinate the trees, provide a wildlife habitat. Okay, so nutrient cycles maintenance, maintain biodiversity. These are some of the ecosystem services. So biodiversity provides ecosystem services to humans. Now, the human beings, because of their activities, that's called anthropogenic. Anthropogenic activities means activities related to human beings. Now, because of human activities, we have the release of carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas, and aerosol emissions. These are all the exhausted materials from automobiles. They cause a change in climate, what is an increase in concentration of carbon dioxide and aerosol products, increase what we have the temperature, rainfall patterns, change, rise in sea level, etc. Climate. Now, this climate produces impacts on human beings. Change in climate causes impacts on human beings. Then the climate also just produces impacts on biodiversity. We have seen already loss of biodiversity, falling of trees, etc. Now the biodiversity is responsible for regulating the climate. For example, the precipitation of rainfall, precipitation, the various climatic conditions, all being because of the forests and other related organisms, that is the biodiversity. Now the biodiversity through its ecosystem functions responsible for biogeochemical cycles, the nutrient cycles, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. As a result of these biogeochemical cycles, we have biogenic greenhouse gas. This is because of the human activities. Here it is a release of greenhouse gas by biogenesis from the living organism. This is from the fossil fuels, this is from the living organism. And also we have aerosol emissions, some emitted materials in the form of just droplets in the air. They affect the climate. So climate is affected. A change in climate occurs because of anthropogenic activity, results in greenhouse gas release, and also biogenic release of greenhouse gases by biogeochemical cycles. Both affect the climate. The climate causes its impact on biodiversity, affecting the biodiversity. And the biodiversity is responsible for regulating the climate by different ways. Now, the biodiversity through its ecosystem services provide something better to human life. So that's all about we have the link between the biodiversity, climate, human, biogeochemical cycles. So all are being interrelated. So that the link responsible for interdependent supply and also for maintaining the climatic conditions and preventing the loss of biodiversity. And through ecosystem services, now the biodiversity provides better things to human services or human life. Now the sixth factor, or we can say that is a thing responsible for the cause for one of the causes of biodiversity loss, that is shifting or doom cultivation. It's also called by another name slash and burn agriculture. What's the meaning for that one? Large areas are being burned and cleared and farmed for 2 to 3 seasons until the fertility remains the soil, after which the crop production is not profitable in these areas. So they are cultivating only for 2 to 3 seasons, after which what will happen, the fertility of the soil is being reduced. So what is happening, the crop production is not profitable. Now, so what's the meaning? So in shifting cultivation, plants of tree vegetation, mainly tree vegetation, not shrubs or herbs, the tree vegetation are burned away, and the cleared patches, small areas, normally formed for 2 to 3 seasons, after which their fertility reduces a point where crop production is no longer profitable. So after 2 to 3 seasons only, it retains the fertility, the soil, after which what is happening is the crop production is not profitable. Now what are they doing, these people? Then actually the farmer that abandons this patch and cuts down a new patch of forested trees elsewhere, that is in any area, for crop production. So they can cultivate only for 2 to 3 seasons, after which they abandon that land, leaving that land and cut down new just patch of trees of forest and for crop production. This is what they do. And what we have this type of, or we can say, where we have this type of, that is cultivation, the one which reduces the biodiversity, causes biodiversity loss. This system is practiced in northeastern regions of India. Now, what are the impacts of this gym cultivation? When large or vast areas are cleared, we have the removal of forest cover. We have what is called the pollution, release of carbon dioxide, which in turn affects what we have the habitat loss and also causes a change in climate, and that one impacts on plants and animals, particularly we can say generally the biodiversity. That's the effect of this one that causes actually the loss of biodiversity, because we are burning away a particular land area, that trees vegetation. So what are the impacts of shifting or June cultivation? So when vast areas are cleared and burned, it resulted in number one, loss of forest cover, number two, pollution, and the discharge of more carbon dioxide. As a result of discharge of more carbon dioxide and burning, we have loss of habitat and climate change. And both have impacts on what we have the biodiversity of that region. Now the next factor, another cause for loss of biodiversity, co-extinction. What is co-extinction? There are two species which are interdependent on each other. One species extinct, another species will also extinct. That is called co-extinction. Extinction of two different species, but there is an interdependent supply between these two species. When one extincts, automatically another one will also become extinct. So co-extinction of a species is the loss of a species as a consequence of extinction of another species, as a result of actually extinction of another species. So extinction of one will automatically just normally cause the extinction of other. When one species becomes extinct, it leads to the extinction of another. For example, the relationship between orchid bees in tropical forests and the tropical trees, the trees in the tropical forests. So there is a connection between the orchid bees and the tropical trees. Orchid bees are responsible for the pollination of the tropical forest trees. So the orchid bee is called as a keystone species. When these species dies, automatically the tropical forest trees soon become extinct because without pollination there is no formation of fruits, there is no formation of seed, and ultimately there is no formation of new plant. And also we have another example, dodo, the pigeon passenger, the passenger pigeon we can see of Mauritius. Another one, what is called Calvaria tree. This is the relationship between what is called Calvaria tree and the dodo, the passenger pigeon of Mauritius. Another example for what is called co-extinction. Now, what are the examples for co-extinction? We have two examples in our syllabus. One, the orchid bees and forest trees. The relationship or connection between the orchid bees and forest trees. Now, the orchid bees are considered as the keystone species. So, they are responsible for the very survival of the trees of the tropical forests because they affect cross pollination. So, once the orchid bees die, ultimately there is a co-extinction of what we have the tropical forest trees because they affect only cross pollination. Without cross pollination there is no formation of fruit and seeds, thereby what we have, there is no new plants produced. Number two, the connection between a tree by name Calvaria tree and what we have, the extinct bird, what is seen already, the passenger pigeon of Mauritius Island, the dodo bird. Now, the Calvaria tree dependent on, that is what we have the dodo for the completion of its life cycle because it affects what is called the pollination as well as, for example, for the germination process of the seeds. How? Now there is a mutual relationship between these two, and so it's called the mutualistic association, give and take policy. So normally this plant provides what we have the fruits, and the bird is taking what is called the seeds of the fruits. The seeds have hard endocarp. They cannot undergo what is called the germination unless the endocarp has been removed or digested. What is the relationship? So the mutualistic association is that the hard endocarp of seeds of this what we have the Calvaria tree are made permeable by the action of the large stones present in the gizzard of what is called the pigeon, passenger pigeon. Gizzard is otherwise called the grinding mill, where you have large stones are present for making or breaking what is called the nuts. As normally you know that when the birds are eating on nuts. Okay, and also the digestive juices present in the digestive tract and making the germination easier. Suppose if the extinction of dodo bird occurs that led to the imminent what we have danger of the co-extinction of what we have, that is the trees, what is called the Calvaria tree. So the hard endocarp of seeds are broken or made permeable by the large stones present in the grinding mill, what is called the gizzard of dodo bird, and also the digestive juices. So that what's happening, we have the seed germination that is possible easier because of the breaking of the hard endocarp with the help of stones and the digestive juices. So when the dodo bird extinct, and ultimately what will happen, the plant will also become extinct. That's called the co-extinction of the trees. The last factor responsible for the loss of biodiversity, one of the causes, that is intensive agriculture. See, spread up agriculture is sometimes at the cost of wetlands, we have the forests and grasslands. And as a result, what is happening? We have something to the biodiversity. So the intensive agriculture is based on a few just what we have high yielding varieties. We are giving importance to the high yielding varieties, and that's why we are doing the intensive agriculture, and that is yielding more. Though it is yielding more, it results in loss of biodiversity. As a result, what is happening? Effect number one, there is a reduction in genetic diversity because we are concentrating only on a few just high yielding varieties. So there is a loss of reduction of genetic diversity. This is one of the effects of intensive agriculture of what we have high yielding varieties. Number two, so it increases the vulnerability. So the species are vulnerable, the plants are vulnerable, not resistant. So it increases the vulnerability just of crop plants. Vulnerability of crop plants to sudden attack by pathogens and the pests. So the plants lost their resistance. That is called they are vulnerable to the disease. They are vulnerable to the attack of pathogens and also what we have the pest. Then nowadays, you know that when today in Tamil Nadu, there are only few varieties of traditional paddy strains. There are only a few traditional paddy strains, others are new varieties, hybrid varieties. Due to use to hybrid varieties in Tamil Nadu, so a number of hybrid varieties are available. You know that one, that is nearly 1,000 varieties are available. Most of them are hybrid varieties. So we have only the just what we the traditional varieties only few in number. This is because of due to use of hybrid varieties. So these are the impacts of intensive agriculture. We are doing hybridization process by crossing two different varieties to get more yield. As we are concentrating only on high yielding varieties, there is a reduction in genetic diversity, and also the plants are vulnerable to pathogens and also the pests because they are non-resistant to diseases, pathogens, as well as whatever the pests. So these are all the different causes of biodiversity loss. Now we have to go for the biodiversity loss, some factors, the human activities, what are the different human activities, the direct activities, indirect activities responsible for that is loss of biodiversity. Now let us discuss about the loss of biodiversity because of human activities. You know that one, species are now becoming extinct at a faster rate. So normally in course of time we have evolving of new species and then what is called dying of new species, dying of species. That is normally taking place in the past years. That's a natural process. But nowadays, you know that one species are now becoming extinct at a faster rate. What's the reason that one? So this reason, that is faster rate of extinction, destabilizing ecological stability and distribution of biological diversity on Earth. This is normally destabilizing the ecological stability. Now the ecological stability is normally that is shaken and distribution of biological diversity on Earth. So, what is the reason for what we have the loss of biodiversity? Main reason human activities. Human activities greatly contribute to the loss of biodiversity. Human activities. Now we have the natural resources in the form of land, water, and organisms. All have been indiscriminately exploited by human activities. Indiscriminately actually exploited by human activities or by human beings, we can say. Now we have convention of biological diversity made by different countries every year in different places. That's called CBD. According to their report, direct and indirect human activities normally have detrimental or harmful effect on biodiversity. So both direct and indirect activities are harmful or detrimental to the biodiversity. That is according to CBD, that is Convention of Biological Diversity. That is a summit made by different people in a particular region every year just to conserve the biodiversity. What are the methods to be followed? Instructions to be given to different countries. Now, what are the human direct activities responsible for biodiversity loss? Change in local land use, changing the land frequently. Species introduction or removal to that area. Harvesting of trees. Then we have the grasses, etc. The pollution, the major cause. Then climate change. So all these factors contribute to a greater pressure on the biodiversity loss. So we have there is change in local land use, species introduction or removal, harvesting, pollution, climate change contribute a great pressure on what is called the loss of biodiversity. These are the direct human activities. So according to CBD, both the direct and indirect activities of humans responsible for that is loss of biodiversity. We have seen some of the direct effects. Now what are the indirect human drivers? Which include demographic, economic, technological, cultural and religious factors. These are all the indirect drivers responsible for the loss of biodiversity. Now we have the addition of new species. Though we are adding new species, though we have the discovery of new species, there is a little hope for adding new species through speciation into the biodiversity treasure. That's about what we have some indirect human drivers. Again, we have to talk about some of the indirect effects of human activities which results in biodiversity loss. What are they? Number one, monsoon failure. This is because of human activity, because of using the one smoke, etc. Global warming, the release of greenhouse gases due to the human activities. Depletion in ozone layer. It's also because of the release of that one ozone depleting substances. Landslides and hilly states. This is because of human activity and pollution. So these are all the indirect effects of human activities. They cause normally you see that one the loss of biodiversity. Okay. Now according to IUCN, they have released what's called the Red Data Book. The Red List that is formulated in 2004 documents the extinction of 784 species in the 500 years, the last 500 years. Now it is estimated that the current rate of biodiversity loss is 100 to 1000 times higher than the naturally occurring extinction rate and is still expected to grow in the future. This is the naturally occurring extinction rate, 100 to 1000 times higher. This loss of biodiversity has immense effect on plant, animal and human life. What are the negative effects of biodiversity loss? It includes mainly dramatic influence on food web. What is food chain? The flow of energy from one trophic level to another trophic level is called food chain. Many food chains, many interrelated food chains together form a food web. Now here I represent a food chain. So starting with the plants, the producer, we have it is being eaten by grasshopper, grasshopper is being eaten by frog, frog is being eaten by snake, and it is being eaten by the bird hawk. Suppose even reduction one species can adversely affect the entire food chain, which further leads to an overall reduction in the biodiversity. See that one, suppose the number of grasshoppers have been reduced, then what will happen ultimately? There is no food available for the frog. There is no food available for the frog. So the entire biodiversity. So once there is no food for frog, the frog population declines. The frog population declines. So that ultimately it will affect the number of snakes. So the entire biodiversity will affect in that food chain. So reduced biodiversity. So as a result of this one, when one species is being affected, reduced, the entire food chain is affected, which further leads to an overall reduction in the biodiversity. Overall reduction number of grasshopper leads to reduction in frogs reduction leads to snakes, reduction numbers, ultimately we have the hawk number is also reduced. So reduced biodiversity leads to immense danger for food security. Now this is actually there is no food available for the frog. If the number of grasshoppers have been reduced, ultimately the number of frogs declining. So no food available for snails. That is called the food security. By reducing ecosystem services, we have the products of ecosystem processes. They are called as ecosystem services. So when one species is declining, reduced in number, ultimately the entire food chain, the overall biodiversity is affected. So there is no food security for the organism. This is the food. These are all called the trophic levels or the food levels. When one food level decreases in number, ultimately the next one also decreases. So that's about what we have the negative effects of biodiversity loss. Reduction in number leads to reduction in the overall biodiversity, and also there is no food security in the ecosystems. That's about what we have the loss of biodiversity that causes different effects totally. We have to go to the next one in the next class. Okay, thank you.